This is the heartbreaking story of Evelyn, a 50-year-old mother who raised her son with nothing but love. But when he got married, everything changed. His wife, Evelyn's daughter-in-law, began poisoning his heart. She told the children their grandmother was an enemy. She turned a home full of laughter into a house of hate. Every day, Evelyn watched her family slip further away. The son who once hugged her now avoided her. The grandchildren who once ran into her arms now looked away in fear. But one day, Evelyn decided to fight back, not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth. She walked into a courtroom, heartbroken but fearless, and told her story before a judge. And before the world. What happened next would shock everyone and change the meaning of family. Forgiveness and love forever. Evelyn Harper sat by the kitchen window, her trembling hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Outside, the California sunlight fell across her small backyard, the same yard where she once watched her grandson, Ethan, chase butterflies, and where her granddaughter, Lily, built her first sandcastle. Those memories were like little rays of light she tried to hold on to. But lately, the light had begun to fade. For months now, Evelyn had been treated like a stranger in her own home. Her daughter-in-law, Vanessa, had slowly turned her family against her. A whisper here, a complaint there. It started small, with eye rolls and cold shoulders, but soon it became something sharper, more deliberate. Vanessa began telling the children that their grandmother didn't love them, that she was jealous of their mother, that she wanted to take them away. At first, Evelyn tried to ignore it. She thought love could outlast lies, but one evening, as she came down the stairs holding Ethan's favorite toy car, she overheard Vanessa's voice from the living room. "Sweetheart," Vanessa said softly, "Grandma doesn't want you happy. That's why she gets angry when you spend time with me. She's not your friend, she's an enemy." Ethan's small voice trembled. "But Grandma hugs me every night." Vanessa smiled, her tone sugary sweet. "That's how enemies fool you, darling." Evelyn froze, her heart breaking in silence. Every word was a blade. She wanted to rush in, to scream, to defend herself, but she couldn't. Because standing beside Vanessa was her own son, Daniel. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend her. He just stood there, staring blankly, as if his mother no longer existed. Later that night, Evelyn confronted him in the kitchen. "Danny," she whispered, "how could you let her say those things?" Daniel sighed, his tone heavy with irritation. "Mom, you always make things complicated. Vanessa just wants peace in the house. Maybe it's best if you give them space." Give them space? Her own son, the boy she raised through sleepless nights and endless sacrifices, now asking her to vanish quietly from their lives. That night, Evelyn packed a small suitcase and walked out of the house that had once been filled with laughter. The world outside was quiet, but inside her heart, a storm was rising. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay where love had turned into humiliation. But she also knew one thing. She would not give up. She would find a way to tell her truth, no matter how hard the world tried to silence her. When Evelyn visits the house again to see her grandchildren, Vanessa calls the police on her. But what the police tell her next will change everything and set her on a path toward the courtroom. When love becomes a crime. The next morning, Evelyn woke up in a cheap motel room on the edge of town. The air smelled of old carpet and loneliness. Her phone buzzed with a dozen unread messages, all from people she hadn't heard from in years, offering shallow sympathy or awkward silence. But not a single one was from Daniel. Not a single one said, "Come home, Mom." For 2 weeks, Evelyn stayed away. Every day she sat in the motel courtyard, feeding birds with crumbs from her breakfast, trying to gather the courage to go back, just once, to see her grandchildren. She told herself she wouldn't cause trouble. She only wanted to see Ethan and Lily's faces, to know they still remembered her warmth. So one Sunday morning, she put on her floral dress, the same one she'd worn at Ethan's 5th birthday, and walked the 3 miles to her son's house. She stood at the gate, her heart pounding. The garden she had tended for years now looked like a stranger's land. New furniture, trimmed hedges, no sign of her roses. She pressed the doorbell. Vanessa opened the door. Her smile was sharp, her eyes cold. "Oh, you," she said flatly. "I just came to see the kids," Evelyn said quietly. "Only for a few minutes." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You were told not to come here." "I wasn't told anything," Evelyn replied. "They're my grandchildren, Vanessa," but before she could finish, Vanessa stepped inside and slammed the door. A moment later, Evelyn heard her voice again, angrier, louder. She was calling someone? And when the door opened again, it wasn't Vanessa standing there. It was two uniformed police officers. "Ma'am," one said carefully, "we got a call about a trespasser." Evelyn's heart sank. "Trespasser? I'm their grandmother. I lived here." The younger officer glanced at the house, uncomfortable. "Ma'am, your daughter-in-law says you no longer reside here and have been asked not to visit." Tears burned her eyes. "I've done nothing wrong. I just wanted to see them." The officer sighed, then softened his tone. "Look, we're not arresting you, but if you want to see your grandkids again, you'll need to get a court order. That's the proper way." Those words struck like lightning. A court order. For a long moment, Evelyn stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the officers leave. Watching the curtains move slightly as Ethan's little face peeked out before being pulled away by Vanessa. Something inside her snapped. She had been quiet all her life, silent through her husband's death, patient through poverty, humble through humiliation. But now, her silence had cost her everything she loved. As she walked back down that lonely street, her tears dried into determination. Maybe she didn't have power or money or family behind her. But she still had truth, and she would take that truth to the only place left where it might still matter. The courtroom. Evelyn steps into the courthouse for the first time, uncertain and trembling. But there she meets someone, a young lawyer who sees something in her that no one else does, and decides to fight by her side. The voice. She never knew. She had. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and polished floors, and Evelyn Harper had never felt smaller in her life. People hurried past her in suits, holding files thicker than her old family albums. She clutched her purse to her chest like a shield, her heart pounding. It had been 25 years since she'd last entered a government building, back when she renewed her driver's license. Now, she was here to reclaim something far more important, her right to love her grandchildren. She walked hesitantly to the clerk's desk. I was told I need a court order to see my grandchildren," she said, her voice trembling. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, nodded softly. "Do you have a lawyer, ma'am?" Evelyn shook her head. "No, I don't even know how to start." The woman hesitated, then scribbled a name on a sticky note. "Try this office across the street. His name's Michael Grant. He takes cases like yours sometimes, pro bono." Evelyn thanked her and crossed the street, her heart fluttering with both hope and fear. The sign on the door read, "Grant and Foster Legal Services." Inside, a young man in his 30s looked up from his desk. His brown hair was a little messy, his tie slightly loosened, and his eyes carried the kind of empathy that could soften any stranger's fear. "Hi," he said, standing up. "You must be Mrs. Harper." The clerk called ahead. "Please sit." Evelyn sat carefully, folding her hands in her lap. "I don't have much," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to see my grandchildren again. My daughter-in-law, she's turned them against me. My own son won't even talk to me." Michael listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned forward. "Mrs. Harper," he said gently, "you deserve to be heard. What's happening to you isn't right. The law recognizes a grandparent's visitation rights, especially when there's no history of harm. We can file a petition under the family code, but I have to ask, are you ready for a fight? Because this won't be easy." Evelyn looked down at her trembling hands. She thought of Ethan's laughter, of Lily's drawings taped to her refrigerator, of the nights she prayed for her son's love to return. Then she lifted her chin. "I've been fighting all my life, Mr. Grant. I just never called it that." Michael smiled faintly. "Then let's start a new kind of fight, the kind where you get your family back." As they began filling out paperwork, Evelyn felt something stirring inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't anger or bitterness. It was strength. She was no longer the woman who cried in silence at night. She was a mother who had been wronged, and now she had a voice, one the world would finally have to hear. When they finished, Michael said, "The first hearing is in 3 weeks. We'll need evidence, letters, photos, witnesses, anything that shows your bond with the children." Evelyn nodded, her eyes glistening. "I have boxes full of memories. They'll see what love looks like." As she left the office, the autumn wind brushed her hair, carrying with it a strange new feeling. Hope. 3 weeks later, Evelyn walks into court, but she isn't prepared for what her son and daughter-in-law will say on the stand. Lies that could destroy her case before it even begins. The lies on the stand. 3 weeks later, Evelyn Harper stood outside the courtroom doors, clutching the folder Michael had helped her prepare. Photographs of Ethan's first school day, Lily's handmade birthday cards, and an old video of them both laughing in her arms. Her stomach churned as if the floor beneath her might give way at any moment. Michael placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens in there," he said quietly, "you stay calm. Truth is on your side, Mrs. Harper. They might twist it, but the judge will see through lies if you stand firm." Evelyn nodded, trying to steady her breath. "It's just, I never thought I'd see the day my own son sits across from me in court." The doors opened and they stepped into the courtroom. It was smaller than she imagined, quiet, with sunlight streaming through high windows. On one side sat Vanessa, her face calm but her eyes sharp, perfectly dressed as if attending a business meeting. Beside her was Daniel, his jaw tight, his gaze avoiding his mother's. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Evelyn's knees trembled as she lowered herself into her chair again. The judge, a composed woman in her 50s named Judge Reynolds, adjusted her glasses. "Case 47B, Harper versus Harper," the clerk read aloud. Michael rose first. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Evelyn Harper, is requesting grandparent visitation rights after being denied contact with her grandchildren by her son and daughter-in-law." Vanessa's attorney stood. "Your Honor, the respondents maintain that Mrs. Harper has created a toxic environment and emotionally distressing conditions for the children. We are here to protect them." Evelyn's head jerked up, shocked. "That's not true," she blurted, then immediately regretted it. Michael placed a gentle hand on her arm, signaling her to breathe. Vanessa took the stand first. Her voice was soft, her manner perfectly rehearsed. "Evelyn always interfered with how I raise my children," she said smoothly. "She would undermine me in front of them. Once she even told Ethan that I wasn't his real mother because I didn't understand love." Evelyn's eyes widened. "That never happened," she whispered to Michael, trembling, but the lawyer kept his calm. "Don't worry," he whispered back. "She's overreaching. Let her finish." Then came Daniel. Seeing her son rise to speak felt like watching her own heart stand against her. He cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "Mom and I have had tension. I love her, but she can be controlling. We just wanted peace at home." Evelyn could barely hear the rest. Every word cut deeper than any wound she'd ever known. When it was her turn to testify, she stood slowly, clutching a photo in her hand. "I didn't come here to fight," she began softly. "I came because my grandchildren don't even know why their grandma disappeared. I was there when they were born. I held them when they cried. I taught them to pray before bed. How can love become a danger to them?" Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed locked on Judge Reynolds. "I may not have much left, Your Honor, but I have love, and it shouldn't be treated like a crime." For a moment, silence filled the room. Even Daniel's eyes flickered with something, doubt or guilt, she couldn't tell. Judge Reynolds finally spoke. "We'll reconvene in 2 days for review. I'll hear the children's welfare report before making a decision." Evelyn left the stand weak but unbroken. Michael looked at her and said quietly, "That moved her." "I saw it," Evelyn nodded faintly. "Then maybe there's still a chance." 2 days later, the judge calls for the children's welfare report, but what the social worker reveals shocks everyone, uncovering a truth about Vanessa that even Daniel never knew. The truth beneath the perfect smile. 2 days felt like an eternity. Evelyn hardly slept, replaying every word of the hearing in her mind. The way Vanessa's voice had sounded so calm, so confident. The way Daniel couldn't meet her eyes. The ache of knowing her own son believed those lies. Michael had told her to rest, but how could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's little hands pressed against the window. That final day before Vanessa pulled him away. When the morning of the second hearing arrived, the courtroom was hushed, tense. Even the air felt heavier. Evelyn sat beside Michael, gripping her purse tightly. Across from her, Vanessa looked perfectly composed, one hand resting on Daniel's arm. Her diamond bracelet sparkled under the courtroom lights. Judge Reynolds entered and spoke firmly. "We are here to hear the findings of the Children's Welfare Report conducted by Social Services." A woman in a gray suit stood. She introduced herself as Megan Ortiz, a social worker with 20 years of experience. She opened a thick folder and began. "After several visits to the Harper residence," Megan said, "and private conversations with both children, I have observed concerning emotional behaviors." Evelyn's breath caught. Megan continued. "The children, Ethan and Lily, display signs of confusion and anxiety whenever their grandmother's name is mentioned. Both children expressed fear of displeasing their mother, Mrs. Vanessa Harper, because they were told that their grandmother wanted to harm them." Gasps rippled through the room. Evelyn's hands trembled, tears welling. Judge Reynolds leaned forward. "Ms. Ortiz, are you saying that these statements were directly influenced by Mrs. Harper, the daughter-in-law?" "Yes, Your Honor," Megan said. "Through multiple conversations, it became clear that the children were repeatedly told negative and false stories about their grandmother. There is also evidence of emotional manipulation, specifically fear-based conditioning, that caused distress in both minors." Daniel's face drained of color. "What?" he whispered. Megan didn't stop. "Additionally, we found that Mrs. Vanessa Harper restricted communication between the children and their grandmother by blocking calls, deleting messages, and instructing school staff not to release information about the children's activities to her." The courtroom fell utterly silent. Vanessa's expression cracked for the first time, her lips tightening, her gaze darting nervously. Michael stood, his tone steady but cutting. "So, Ms. Ortiz, would you say that Mrs. Evelyn Harper posed any emotional or physical risk to the children?" "None whatsoever," Megan replied firmly. "On the contrary, the children associate her memory with warmth, safety, and affection. Their confusion stems entirely from being told otherwise." Evelyn covered her face as quiet sobs escaped her. She could barely breathe, but they were tears of relief this time, tears that finally washed away months of helplessness. Judge Reynolds exhaled slowly. "We will resume this case in 1 week. At that time, I will issue my decision. Until then, no party may interfere with the children's counseling process." As everyone rose, Daniel stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't follow Vanessa out. He didn't even look at her. Outside the courtroom, Evelyn stood quietly under the gray afternoon sky. Michael turned to her and said, "You did it, Evelyn. The truth is finally out." She shook her head gently, whispering, "No, Michael. The truth has only begun." That night, Daniel arrives unannounced at Evelyn's motel, and what he confesses about Vanessa's hidden life and his own guilt will shatter Evelyn's heart all over again. The knocket. Midnight rain was falling softly against the window of Evelyn's motel room. The sound was almost calming, like the earth whispering to her that everything would soon wash clean. She sat at the small wooden desk, sorting through old photographs she'd brought from home. Ethan's toothless smile, Lily's pink dress from her first recital, Daniel holding both of them in his arms. She wiped her eyes, tracing her son's face with her finger. "You were such a good boy," she whispered. "What happened to us?" Just then, there was a knock at the door. 3 soft taps. She froze. It was nearly midnight. Who could it be at this hour? Her heart quickened as she walked cautiously toward the door. "Who is it?" she asked. "It's me," came the quiet voice. "Daniel." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. For a second, she couldn't move. Then, with trembling hands, she unlocked the door. Daniel stood there, drenched from the rain, his eyes red and exhausted. He looked nothing like the confident man she had seen in court. Without saying a word, he stepped inside. "Daniel," she whispered. "What are you doing here?" He sank onto the edge of the bed, running a hand through his wet hair. "I didn't know where else to go," he said hoarsely. "Vanessa's gone." She packed a bag and took the kids to her sister's house. Evelyn's chest tightened. "Gone? Why?" "Because I confronted her," he said, his voice breaking. "After the hearing. After—" He looked up, his eyes red. "I didn't even see what she was doing to the kids. I was so busy trying to keep peace that I let her poison everything." Evelyn placed her hand gently on his. "Peace built on silence isn't peace, Daniel. It's surrender. But it's not too late. You can still fix this." He nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. "I want to tell the court everything. The truth. I'll testify that you never hurt them, never interfered. I'll say it all." For the first time in months, Evelyn smiled. It was small and tired, but it was real. "That's all I ever wanted, for you to remember who you are." As Daniel stood to leave, she said softly, "Tell Ethan and Lily their grandmother loves them more than life itself." He turned at the door. "I will, and next week, we'll do this right." Evelyn watched him disappear into the rain, her heart torn between sorrow and hope. She knew the battle wasn't over, but at last she wouldn't be fighting it alone. In the final week before the verdict, Vanessa returns, furious, manipulative, and desperate to keep control. What she does next will push Evelyn to her breaking point and force the judge to make a life-changing decision. The last storm before dawn. The days leading up to the final hearing were heavy with tension. Evelyn could feel it in the air, that uneasy stillness before something breaks. She had seen storms like this before, back when she lived on the coast. The sky would turn gray and silent, almost respectful, before thunder tore it open. Michael had spent the week preparing their statements. Daniel had filed an affidavit admitting his mistake and expressing full support for his mother's visitation rights. It was a brave move, one that came with consequences. But he told Evelyn, "If I lose everything because I told the truth, then at least I'll lose it with my soul intact." On the evening before the hearing, Evelyn was sitting on her motel bed, folding her documents neatly into a folder, when someone banged violently on the door. The sound made her jump. She hesitated before opening it. When she did, her breath caught. It was Vanessa. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes blazing with rage. "So, this is where you're hiding," she hissed, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "Vanessa," Evelyn began, but Vanessa cut her off. "Don't you dare say my name," she snapped. "You think you've won, don't you? You and that pathetic son of mine. You think the judge will give you back my children?" Evelyn steadied herself. "They're not your children, Vanessa. They're Daniel's and yours, and they're my grandchildren. They deserve all the love they can get, not hate disguised as protection." Vanessa's expression twisted. "You don't understand love. You don't understand me. Everything I built, my home, my family, you're trying to take it away." Evelyn looked at her calmly. "No, I'm trying to save it." For a moment, Vanessa's mask cracked. Her voice trembled as she said, "Do you know what it's like to feel unwanted every single day? To walk into a house and know you're only second best, always living in the shadow of someone's mother?" Evelyn softened slightly. "You didn't have to compete, Vanessa. You just had to share." But the moment of vulnerability vanished as quickly as it came. Vanessa's eyes went cold again. "I won't let you see them. Even if the court says yes, I'll make sure those kids never look at you the same way." Evelyn stood her ground. "You already tried that, and yet they still remember my voice." Vanessa's face contorted with fury. "You think you can beat me in court? I'll tell them you're unstable, that you've threatened me." "Enough," came a voice from the hallway. Both women turned. Daniel stood at the door, his face pale but determined. "I heard everything." Vanessa froze. "Daniel," "No," he said firmly. "You're done manipulating everyone. I've already told the judge everything. Tomorrow I'm testifying for Mom." For a long, dangerous moment, Vanessa said nothing. Then she straightened, her anger hardening into pride. "Fine. Destroy this family if that's what you want." She walked past him and out the door, slamming it behind her. Evelyn stood still, her heart pounding. "Daniel, tomorrow, will the truth be enough?" He looked at her and said softly, "It has to be, Mom. It just has to be." Outside, the rain began again. Heavier this time, louder, like the world was preparing for something final. The day of judgment arrives. As the courtroom fills, shocking new evidence surfaces. A secret Vanessa thought she buried forever. And it changes the case in ways no one expected. The day of judgment. The morning of the final hearing dawned gray and heavy, the sky thick with clouds that looked ready to burst. Evelyn dressed carefully in a simple navy blue dress, the same one she'd worn at Daniel's wedding years ago, the last time her family had truly been whole. She pinned her silver hair neatly and whispered to her reflection, "Today I speak for love, not revenge." Michael picked her up from the motel. His calm voice helped steady her nerves. "Remember, Mrs. Harper, all we need to do is let the truth breathe." Lies choked themselves. At the courthouse, reporters hovered near the entrance. The case had drawn local attention after the welfare report leaked. A story about a grandmother fighting to see her grandchildren had struck a chord with many. Evelyn ignored the cameras and walked inside, her heart steady but heavy. When the hearing began, Judge Reynolds entered with her usual calm authority. "We will hear closing testimonies before rendering a decision," she announced. Vanessa sat on one side, her face pale but composed. Daniel sat on the other, beside Evelyn and Michael. His hands trembled slightly as he whispered, "We're doing the right thing." The first to testify was Megan Ortiz, the social worker. She reiterated her findings, the manipulation, the blocked communication, the children's distress. Then she handed over something new. "Your Honor," Megan said, "we recently obtained additional evidence that may help clarify Mrs. Harper's behavior in the household." Judge Reynolds nodded. "Proceed." Megan held up a small USB drive. "This is a home security recording dated March 3rd of last year. It was provided anonymously, but verified as authentic." The clerk played the video on the courtroom screen. The footage showed the Harper living room, Vanessa sitting on the couch with Ethan and Lily beside her. Her tone was sharp, her expression cruel. "You don't need Grandma anymore," she said coldly. "She's just trying to take Daddy away from us. If she calls, you hang up. If you see her at school, you run." The children looked frightened. Ethan whimpered. "But Grandma gives us cookies," Vanessa snapped. "No cookies! No Grandma! Do you understand me?" Gasps filled the courtroom. Evelyn covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Daniel's face went white with shame. Vanessa rose to her feet, furious. "That video is out of context. Enough," Judge Reynolds said firmly. "Sit down, Mrs. Harper." Michael stood, his voice calm but edged with conviction. "Your Honor, this footage corroborates every statement Mrs. Evelyn Harper has made. This is not a case of a meddling grandmother, it's a case of emotional alienation. A good woman has been slandered and separated from her grandchildren for no reason other than pride and jealousy." Evelyn trembled, clutching the photograph she always kept in her purse, one of Ethan and Lily hugging her. Judge Reynolds looked over her glasses, her tone measured but heavy with meaning. "Mrs. Vanessa Harper, this court finds your actions to be deeply troubling and detrimental to the welfare of the children. This evidence confirms a pattern of deliberate alienation. The court will not tolerate such behavior." Vanessa's lips parted in shock. "You can't," but the judge continued, unmoved. "I will issue my ruling after final statements. Mrs. Evelyn Harper, do you wish to speak before I deliver judgment?" Evelyn rose slowly. The courtroom was silent as she stepped forward. "Your Honor," she said softly, "I don't want to punish anyone. I just want to hold my grandchildren without fear. I want them to know that love doesn't disappear, not even when people try to bury it. That's all I'm asking for." For a moment, Judge Reynolds simply looked at her, as if weighing not just the words, but the soul behind them. "Very well," the judge said finally. "This court will take a short recess before rendering its decision." As the gavel struck, Vanessa's mask cracked completely. She turned toward Evelyn, her whisper like venom. "You think this is over?" "It's not." But Evelyn no longer flinched. She simply looked back at her with quiet strength and said, "Yes, it is. Hook for Part 9. When the court reconvenes, Judge Reynolds delivers a verdict that shocks everyone. A ruling that not only restores Evelyn's rights, but forces Daniel to make the hardest choice of his life." The verdict that changed everything. Courtroom felt like it was holding its breath when Judge Reynolds returned after recess. The bailiff called for order, and everyone stood as she entered. Evelyn's palms were damp, her heartbeat unsteady. Daniel sat beside her, his head bowed. Across the aisle, Vanessa looked hollow-eyed, but still defiant, her lawyer whispering something she no longer seemed to hear. Judge Reynolds cleared her throat, her expression solemn. After reviewing all testimonies, evidence, and the welfare officer's report, she began, this court has reached a decision. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her handkerchief. Every second felt like an hour. The court finds that Mrs. Evelyn Harper has been unjustly denied contact with her grandchildren. There is substantial proof that Mrs. Vanessa Harper engaged in emotional manipulation, preventing the children from maintaining a healthy bond with their grandmother. Vanessa gasped. That's not true, the judge raised a hand sharply. Mrs. Harper, you will not interrupt. That you and Mrs. Vanessa Harper attend mandatory family counseling. If this order is not respected, the court will revisit custody arrangements for your children. Daniel's throat tightened. He could barely nod. Yes, Your Honor. Vanessa, however, was shaking her head. This is ridiculous. You're tearing my family apart. The judge's eyes softened, but her tone did not waver. No, Mrs. Harper, you did that yourself. This ruling is meant to give your children the family they deserve, not the bitterness they've been taught. The gavel struck. Court adjourned. For a long moment, no one moved. The sound of footsteps, papers rustling, and whispers filled the space like distant echoes. Evelyn stood slowly, almost afraid that if she blinked, the whole moment would vanish. Daniel turned to her, his eyes full of guilt and gratitude. Mom, I'm so sorry. Evelyn looked at him with quiet grace. You don't have to be sorry, Daniel. Just be better from now on. For your kids. Vanessa brushed past them, tears streaking her makeup. You've ruined everything. She spat and stormed out. Michael stepped forward, a rare smile touching his lips. Justice doesn't always come easy, Mrs. Harper, but today it did. Evelyn exhaled shakily, her heart lighter than it had been in years. No, Mr. Reed. Today, love finally spoke louder than lies. Outside, the gray sky had broken open, letting in streaks of gold sunlight. Daniel offered to drive her back, but Evelyn shook her head. I'll walk, she said softly. It's been too long since I've walked without fear. As she stepped out into the sunlit street, children ran past her with laughter echoing through the air. She stopped for a moment, smiled through her tears, and whispered, Soon, my loves. Grandma's coming home. But what Evelyn didn't know was that Vanessa wasn't finished. Beneath her fury and humiliation, something darker was brewing, a plan to turn everyone against Evelyn once again. Just when Evelyn begins to heal and reconnect with her grandchildren, Vanessa strikes back, and this time she doesn't use lies in court. She uses the children themselves. The return of the storm. For the first few weeks after the court's verdict, Evelyn felt like she was living in a dream she never wanted to wake from. Every Saturday morning, she would wait by the porch of her small rented house, holding 2 steaming mugs of cocoa, one for Ethan and one for Lily. Their little feet would come running up the walkway, their laughter echoing through the air like bells. Grandma! Ethan would shout, wrapping his arms around her waist. Lily, shy but glowing, would press a small drawing into Evelyn's hand, always something bright, like sunshine or a family with smiling faces. Those weekends were healing her, piece by piece. She'd bake cookies, tell bedtime stories, and listen to their innocent voices as they asked questions about her garden or her old photographs. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt that love was winning, but beneath that fragile peace, darkness was gathering again. Vanessa had not accepted defeat. Her pride burned like acid in her veins. The thought of Evelyn having even a fraction of control over her children filled her with rage. She told herself she wasn't being cruel. She was protecting her family, protecting her children from the old woman's manipulative sympathy, as she called it. So Vanessa began a new game, one far more subtle and dangerous than before. It started small. She told Ethan, Grandma's only pretending to love you so she can take you away from me. She whispered to Lily at night, Be careful around her. She might tell you bad things about me. The poison was slow, deliberate, invisible. Then she began to plant doubts in Daniel's mind again. Don't you think it's strange how happy she is now? She's trying to make us look like bad parents. Daniel tried to ignore her words, but the unease crept back. Old guilt and confusion resurfaced, like cracks in glass. One Sunday afternoon, Evelyn was reading a story to the children when Ethan suddenly pulled away from her embrace. "Mom says you lied to the judge," he blurted, his voice trembling. Evelyn froze. The book slipped from her hands. "What? What did she say, sweetheart?" "That you made up stories to make her look bad," Lily whispered, her eyes filling with confusion. "She said you told the judge things that weren't true." For a moment, Evelyn couldn't speak. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. The same ache she had felt months ago came roaring back, but this time it was sharper, crueler. She knelt down, holding their hands gently. "My darlings," she said softly, "I would never lie to hurt anyone, especially your mother. I love her too because she gave me you." The children stared at her uncertainly, their little hearts torn between two worlds, one filled with warmth and one filled with fear. Later that night, Evelyn called Daniel. "You need to stop her," she said, her voice trembling. "She's doing it again." The children are confused, scared. Daniel sighed heavily. "Mom, please, don't start this again. Vanessa said you're trying to turn them against her. She's just protecting them from being hurt." The line went silent. Evelyn felt the sting of betrayal rise like bile in her throat. "You're blind, Daniel," she whispered, "and your blindness is breaking your children." She hung up, her heart aching as if someone had pressed a knife against it. Outside, the night was cold and still, eerily quiet. The world felt empty again. But this time, Evelyn was not the same woman she once was. She refused to let Vanessa win again. The next morning, she walked into Michael's office, her face calm but determined. "Mr. Reed," she said, setting her purse down, "I need your help again. This time not for justice, but for truth." Michael looked up from his desk, startled by the steel in her voice. "What do you mean?" Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes glistening. "Vanessa's poisoning their minds again. But this time, I'll prove it, in a way she can't deny." Evelyn devises a daring plan, one that could expose Vanessa's manipulation once and for all. But to pull it off, she'll have to risk everything, including the fragile bond she's just rebuilt with her grandchildren. The voice of the innocent. The morning light streamed through Michael Reed's office window, illuminating stacks of legal files and a steaming cup of coffee he'd forgotten to drink. Evelyn sat across from him, her posture straight, but her eyes carrying the exhaustion of 1,000 sleepless nights. "Evelyn," Michael said carefully, "if what you're telling me is true, it means Vanessa is violating a direct court order. But proving psychological manipulation is difficult. It's not like catching someone in a lie on paper." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I understand, Michael, but I also know my grandchildren. I can feel the fear in their voices when they speak now. Something has to be done before they start believing I'm truly their enemy." Michael tapped his pen on the desk, thinking. "We'll need evidence, real, undeniable proof that Vanessa is influencing them again. Words she can't twist or deny." Evelyn's lips pressed into a determined line. "Then I'll get it." That evening, Evelyn went home and sat in her quiet living room. Her heart pounded as she placed a small, voice-activated recorder inside the children's toy basket, something she'd never imagined she'd do. She felt guilty, but desperate times demanded desperate acts. "Forgive me, Lord," she whispered, "but this may be the only way to save them." The following Saturday, Vanessa arrived with the children for their scheduled visit. Her smile was sweet but brittle, like glass. "Make sure you bring them back on time," she said to Evelyn, her tone dripping with false warmth. "They've got a lot of homework. You wouldn't want them falling behind, right?" Evelyn smiled gently. "Of course. Thank you, Vanessa." As soon as the door closed, Evelyn knelt down and hugged her grandchildren tightly. "I missed you both so much," she said softly, but the warmth didn't last long. When Ethan spilled his juice, he flinched and said quickly, "Mom said if we make a mess here, you'll get angry." Evelyn froze. "Did she?" she asked quietly. Lily nodded, eyes wide. She said you don't like when we play too much. She said you only act nice so the judge thinks you're good. The words sliced through Evelyn's heart like glass. But she kept her face calm, gentle, patient. "Sweethearts," she said softly, "you never have to be afraid here. Grandma's home is for laughter and love." For the rest of the day, she focused on making them feel safe. She baked cookies, played board games, told silly stories. By evening, the recorder had captured hours of natural conversation and, most importantly, the children repeating Vanessa's cruel lies. Later that night, when the children were asleep on the couch, Evelyn sat alone in the kitchen, listening to the playback through her headphones. Each word was a dagger, Vanessa's voice, echoing through the innocent mouths of her grandchildren. But alongside the pain was proof of her manipulation. The next morning, she brought the recording to Michael. He listened quietly, jaw tightening as the truth unfolded. When the audio ended, there was a long, heavy silence. Michael finally spoke. "Evelyn, this changes everything. This isn't just influence. This is psychological abuse. The court needs to hear this." Evelyn nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't want revenge, Michael. I just want peace for them. I want them to grow up knowing love, not lies." Michael looked at her with quiet admiration. "You're stronger than you think, Evelyn. Most people would have given up by now." She smiled faintly. "I almost did. But then I remembered, a mother doesn't stop fighting when she's tired. She stops when her children are safe." But as Evelyn prepared to submit the recording, an unexpected fear struck her. What if this exposure destroyed Daniel's family completely? What if the children were taken from both parents? Her heart wavered. Was she saving her family, or breaking it apart forever? That night, she stood by her window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "the truth comes out, no matter what it costs." In the next part, Evelyn's recording reaches the courtroom. And when Vanessa realizes she's been exposed, she makes a desperate move that puts everything and everyone in danger. The breaking point. The morning of the hearing arrived with an icy wind sweeping through the courthouse steps. Evelyn stood outside for a moment, her scarf wrapped tightly around her neck, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. Inside that purse was the recording, the single piece of truth that could either mend her family or shatter it forever. Michael walked beside her, his voice calm but firm. "You're doing the right thing, Evelyn. This is about protecting the children. The court will see that." "I hope so," she whispered, her voice quivering. "Because if this goes wrong, Daniel might never forgive me." As they entered the courtroom, Vanessa was already there, her expression unreadable. She looked tired, but beneath her exhaustion was something sharp, a quiet fury. Daniel sat next to her, his face pale, his eyes darting between the two women who had torn his world apart. Judge Reynolds took her seat. "We are here to review new evidence submitted by Mrs. Evelyn Harper in relation to ongoing custody arrangements." Michael stood. "Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to submit an audio recording taken during Mrs. Harper's recent visitation, which we believe demonstrates ongoing emotional manipulation by Mrs. Vanessa Harper." Vanessa's eyes widened. "What?" she hissed under her breath. "You can't." But it was too late. The courtroom filled with the soft crackle of a recording, the innocent voices of Ethan, and Lily played through the speakers. "Ethan, Mom said Grandma doesn't really love us, Lily. She said, Grandma wants to take us away." Evelyn gently, "Sweethearts, Grandma would never take you away from your mom. I just want to love you." The voices faded. Then came the silence, thick, electric, unbearable. Judge Reynolds's face darkened. "Mrs. Vanessa Harper, would you like to explain this?" Vanessa stammered, her hands shaking. It's taken out of context. Kids misunderstand things." "Misunderstand?" Michael cut in sharply. "Your Honor, this isn't a misunderstanding. It's conditioning. Those children were made to fear the one person who only ever showed them love." Daniel looked at Vanessa, his voice breaking. "Is this true, Vanessa? Did you really say those things to them?" Vanessa's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand," she cried. "She's trying to steal my family. She's always wanted to control everything, even you, Daniel. I had to protect our children. But no one believed her now. Judge Reynolds's tone was calm, but firm as stone. Mrs. Vanessa Harper, this court finds your behavior harmful and manipulative toward the minors. Effective immediately, your visitation rights will be suspended pending a psychological evaluation. Vanessa gasped, her face draining of color. You can't take my children from me, she screamed, rising to her feet. Bailiffs moved closer, but before they could act, Vanessa turned toward Evelyn, her eyes burning with hatred. This is your fault, she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. You've destroyed my family. Evelyn stood still, her own tears falling silently. No, Vanessa, she said softly. You destroyed it yourself. I'm just trying to save what's left. Vanessa collapsed back into her seat, sobbing uncontrollably as the bailiffs escorted her out. Daniel sat frozen, his hands shaking. What happens now? He asked quietly. Judge Reynolds' expression softened. Mr. Harper, until your wife undergoes evaluation, temporary custody will be shared between you and Mrs. Evelyn Harper. I urge you to use this time to rebuild trust and stability for your children. When the gavel fell, Evelyn felt the weight of years lift from her chest, but in its place came something heavier. Sorrow. This wasn't victory. It was the wreckage of everything she had once prayed would heal. Outside the courthouse, Daniel caught up to her. His eyes were red, his voice unsteady. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. Evelyn turned to him, her expression soft. You start by being honest with them, and with yourself. Don't let them grow up believing love has to hurt. She walked away then, her steps slow, her heart weary but steady. For the first time, she felt the world had heard her truth, but it had come at a cost. As she disappeared down the courthouse steps, Daniel looked back toward the doors where Vanessa had been taken away. The family he once thought perfect was gone, but maybe, just maybe, something new could grow from the ruins. As Vanessa faces the consequences of her actions, Evelyn must now help her grandchildren heal. But the scars of manipulation run deep. And when Vanessa makes an unexpected move from the shadows, Evelyn's newfound peace is once again threatened. Shadows of forgiveness, weeks passed like slow-moving clouds after a storm. The court's decision had changed everything. Vanessa was gone, ordered to attend therapy and restricted from contacting the children until further notice. Daniel had moved back into his mother's home temporarily, trying to hold his broken family together. But healing wasn't as simple as a legal verdict. Some wounds lived deeper than skin. They lived in silence, hesitation, and mistrust. Evelyn noticed it most in the children's eyes. Ethan no longer laughed as freely as before. Lily often woke in the middle of the night crying, asking if her mother hated her. Evelyn would sit by her bedside, stroking her hair, whispering, "Your mother loves you in her own way, sweetheart. She's just lost right now." Daniel watched all of it with quiet guilt. Some nights he'd sit on the porch with a drink in his hand, staring at the stars. "Mom," he said one night, voice heavy, "I don't know who I am anymore. I spent years believing Vanessa's words over yours, and now I can't even look at myself in the mirror." Evelyn reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You made mistakes, Daniel. But so did I. Maybe if I'd spoken sooner, fought harder back then, this wouldn't have gone so far." He shook his head. "No, Mom. You fought enough for all of us. I'm the one who didn't listen." The house that once echoed with loneliness now carried faint traces of warmth again. Laughter returned slowly, like sunlight creeping into a dark room. On weekends, they'd visit the park, feed ducks by the pond, or simply sit on the swing set, talking about silly things. But even as life found rhythm again, Evelyn couldn't shake a quiet fear, a feeling that the peace she'd finally earned was fragile. Her fear proved right when a letter arrived one rainy afternoon. It was from Vanessa. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope, her fingers trembling. She hesitated, then tore it open. The handwriting was messy, emotional. "Evelyn, they say I'm getting better, that I'm learning to accept things. But how can I accept losing my children? I know what I did was wrong. I see that now. I was angry, jealous, scared. You were everything I wasn't. Strong, loved, patient. I thought if I could make them see you as a villain, I'd be safe from losing them. I was wrong. Tell Ethan and Lily I'm sorry. Tell Daniel I still love him. I don't expect forgiveness, but maybe one day. I hope they'll remember the good parts of me. Vanessa Evelyn sat in silence for a long time, the words blurring behind tears. For the first time, she didn't feel anger, only sadness. Later that evening, she handed the letter to Daniel. He read it twice, his lips pressed tightly together, tears sliding down his cheeks. She's broken, he whispered, but maybe this is the first time she's truly being honest. Evelyn nodded. Pain changes people, Daniel. It either makes them crueler or humbler. I think she's finally learning humility. That night, Evelyn tucked Ethan and Lily into bed and kissed their foreheads. She whispered, "You're safe now, and you're loved by everyone who matters." When she turned off the light, she glanced out the window at the moonlight spilling across the quiet street. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was beginning her own journey toward redemption. But Evelyn knew it wasn't over yet. The wounds left by deceit didn't vanish easily. And sometimes, forgiveness could be as painful as betrayal itself. Hook for Part 14. Months later, Vanessa returns, not with anger this time, but with tears and a desperate request. Evelyn must decide whether to open the door to the woman who once destroyed her, or finally close it forever. The door between yesterday and tomorrow. It had been nearly 6 months since Evelyn last saw Vanessa. The seasons had changed. Autumn's gold had turned to winter's silver, and with it, the Harper home had begun to feel alive again. The laughter of Ethan and Lily filled the rooms that were once silent. Daniel had started smiling again, helping Evelyn in the garden, taking the children to school, cooking dinners that sometimes burned but always ended with laughter. For the first time in years, there was peace, but peace, Evelyn knew, was a fragile thing. It could shatter with just a knock on the door. That knock came one cold February evening. Evelyn was setting the dinner table when she heard it, 3 soft, hesitant knocks. Something in her chest tightened. Daniel opened the door, and there she was. Vanessa stood on the porch, thinner than before, her eyes sunken but gentle, her hands trembling around the strap of her purse. She looked nothing like the woman who had once filled courtrooms with venom. This Vanessa was quiet, broken, human. Daniel froze. "Vanessa?" She nodded slowly. "Hi, Daniel," her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to come uninvited. I didn't know where else to go." Evelyn stepped out from the kitchen. The moment their eyes met, silence filled the air. Heavy, thick, filled with memories that neither could run from. "Evelyn," Vanessa said softly, tears already welling. "I know I have no right to stand here, but I needed to see them just once, to tell them I'm sorry." Daniel hesitated, torn between relief and anger. "You're not supposed to contact them until—" "I know," she interrupted gently. "I've completed the counseling, Daniel. I have the paperwork." She pulled out a small folder, her hands trembling. "The court-approved limited visitation. If you and Evelyn agree." Evelyn didn't speak. She walked slowly toward Vanessa, her gaze steady, unreadable. For a long time, they simply stood there, the winter wind weaving between them like a whisper. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "Do you remember the first time you came into this house, Vanessa?" Vanessa nodded weakly. "Yes, you made me tea. You said you were glad your son had found someone kind." Evelyn's eyes glistened. "And I meant it. But kindness isn't just in smiles, Vanessa. It's in how we love. And how we forgive." Vanessa's lips quivered. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want a chance to make things right. Not for me, for them." Evelyn studied her for a moment longer, then finally nodded. "Wait here," she said, her voice calm but gentle. She turned and walked inside. Daniel followed her anxiously. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Evelyn looked at him, her expression soft but resolute. "Your children deserve truth, Daniel, and truth includes their mother, the good and the broken parts." When she returned to the door, Ethan and Lily were standing beside her, their little faces full of confusion. "Mom?" Ethan whispered. Vanessa knelt, tears spilling freely now. "Oh, baby, it's me. It's Mom." Her voice broke completely. "I missed you so much." The children hesitated. Then Lily took a small step forward, then another, and threw her arms around her mother. Ethan followed, crying. Vanessa clung to them as if holding on to air itself, sobbing into their shoulders. Evelyn watched from behind, her heart aching with both pain and peace. This wasn't about victory or revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding something fragile and real. When Vanessa finally stood, she looked at Evelyn with gratitude and disbelief. "You didn't have to let me in," she whispered. Evelyn smiled faintly. "No, Vanessa. But sometimes the hardest battles end not in courts, but at the door of forgiveness." That night, for the first time in years, the Harper family sat at one table again. The air was thick with silence at first, but then Ethan giggled when Daniel burned the bread again, and everyone laughed. Even Vanessa. The past wasn't gone, but it wasn't choking them anymore either. And as Evelyn looked around the table, she realized something she'd forgotten long ago. Love doesn't always heal perfectly. But sometimes that's enough. As Evelyn reflects on everything she's endured, she faces one final decision, whether to hold on to the past or finally let it go. The last part reveals the emotional ending of her journey. A letter, a sunrise, and a goodbye that feels like peace.